Okay, so you want to own a gas station. And the scale of this industry is genuinely hard to picture. There are 151,975 convenience stores in the United States. 122,000 of them sell fuel, and together they sell roughly 80% of all the gasoline purchased in America. In 2025, the industry did $817.5 billion in sales. $476 billion of that was fuel. Two things to hold on to before we go anywhere. The first is that there is a charge on the transaction when you fill up that does not appear anywhere on your receipt. You will never see it. And for the person who owns that station, it frequently takes a larger share of the sale than the profit they made on your entire tank of gasoline. The second is a puzzle. In 1972, America had roughly 290,000 public gasoline stations. By 2019, about 142,000. Roughly half of them are gone. And yet Americans are driving more, and the survivors are moving enormous volumes. Something disappeared, and it was not demand. What disappeared was a particular kind of business, and what replaced it is not what most people think they are walking into. We will get to both. But we start with the price of a gallon, because the price of a gallon is where the illusion lives. Here is the thesis, and everything else is proof. A gas station does not sell gasoline. It rents you 30 feet of asphalt, so you will park next to a door. Everything that matters financially happens after you walk through that door. Let's break down what you actually pay for at the pump. The Energy Information Administration publishes the composition of a gallon's retail price, and for 2025 it breaks down like this: crude oil 51%, refining 14%, taxes 17%, distribution and marketing 18%. Look at those four numbers. Only that last category contains anything the station owner touches, and distribution and marketing covers the pipelines, the terminals, the tanker trucks, and the retailer. The person whose sign you saw from the highway gets a slice of a slice. The tax line is worth pausing on because it is entirely out of the retailer's hands. The federal excise tax is 18 4/10 cents per gallon. State taxes and fees averaged 33 3/10 cents as of January 2026, ranging from 70.9 cents in California down to 9 cents in Alaska. So on the sign out front, the station is advertising a price where roughly a third to a half of the swing between states is government, and half is the price of crude oil, which nobody at that station has any influence over. The Energy Information Administration has a useful rule of thumb here. Retail gasoline moves about 2.4 cents per gallon for every $1 change in crude per barrel. When crude moves $20, that is roughly 50 cents at the pump, and it happens whether the owner likes it or not. So what does the retailer actually keep? In 2025, the Trade Association reported an average gross margin on gasoline of 39.7 cents per gallon. That sounds like a real number, and by historical standards, it is high. Price reporting data shows that from 2014 through 2019, annual rack-to-retail margins averaged somewhere around 22 to 24 cents. There is a saying in the industry now that 40 cents is the new 20 cents. But gross margin is not profit. The cost of actually selling that fuel, the pumps, the canopy lighting, the maintenance, the labor, the electricity to run the dispensers, runs somewhere around 20 to 25 cents per gallon, which leaves a net fuel margin of roughly 10 to 15 cents. 10 cents on a gallon that might cost you $3.50. Fill up 13 gallons, and the station has netted somewhere between $1.30 and $2 for the whole transaction. Now, you could stop the video here, and you would already understand more about fuel retailing than most drivers. Everything so far is just a price breakdown, and price breakdowns are the easy part. The part that actually decides whether that station survives has not appeared yet, and the fastest way to see it is to resolve the first thing I promised you. Let's go find the charge that is not on your receipt. When you tap or swipe a card at that pump, the payment networks take a percentage of the transaction. It is called interchange, and it is set as a percentage of the sale, not as a flat fee. The average combined credit interchange rate in the United States reached 2.36% in 2025, up from 2.02% in 2010. Now run that against a fill-up. A $40 purchase at 2.36% is about 94 cents. On a 13-gallon fill, that is roughly 7 cents per gallon going to the payment networks. Put that next to the net fuel margin of 10 to 15 cents. The card fee is taking somewhere between a third and half of what the station keeps, and in periods when crude spikes and margins compress, it takes most of it, or all of it. That is not a theory. It happened in 2008. When gas crossed $4 a gallon, interchange pushed toward 10 cents per gallon, while the typical station markup was only 11 or 12. Trade association members paid about $7.6 billion in card fees that year, while earning $3.4 billion in profit. And it has gotten much bigger since. In 2025, the convenience industry paid a record $21.3 billion in credit and debit card fees. That includes $4.6 billion in fees charged on taxes the stores are merely collecting on behalf of the government. 82% of the industry's $817 billion in sales went across a card. The trade association's own language on this is blunt. Swipe fees are the second highest operating cost in the industry, behind labor and ahead of rent and utilities, and for many operators, the swipe fees they pay exceed their pre-tax profits. If you know somebody who has ever complained about gas prices at the station, this is the part to send them. Not because the station is a victim, because the money you are angry about mostly did not go there. Now, I want to be fair here, because there is another side to this. The payment networks argue that interchange pays for fraud protection, guaranteed payment, faster checkout, and the rewards programs that consumers actually like. When your card is declined fraudulently at a pump, somebody absorbs that. Their position is that percentage-based pricing reflects the value and the risk in each transaction. For context, the European Union caps consumer credit interchange at 0.3%. The American average is roughly 8 times that. Whether that gap represents a market failure or a different bundle of services is a genuine policy argument, not a settled fact, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But the arithmetic for the station owner is the same either way. On the fuel side, they are running a very large business at very thin margins, and a meaningful share of the thin part goes to somebody else. So how does this business make money at all? Here is the number that reframes everything. In 2025, fuel was 65% of convenience store sales dollars and 38.8% of gross profit dollars. Read that twice. 2/3 of the revenue produces just over 1/3 of the profit, which means the other side of the equation, the store, produces a minority of revenue and a majority of profit. And that turns the entire building inside out. The pumps are not the product. The pumps are the parking lot. So how many people actually walk in? The 2025 Consumer Fuels Survey found that a record 64% of drivers who filled up also went inside the store. That is the highest figure recorded since the survey began in 2007, and a 6-point jump in a single year. The breakdown is telling. Drivers between 35 and 49 went inside 75% of the time. Daily commuters, 72%. Drivers over 65, 35%. Earlier research found that customers who go inside spend an average of about $4.82. Now hold those two facts together. $4.82 inside at inside margins versus $1 to $2 net on a full tank of gasoline. The person who buys a coffee and a sandwich is worth more to that business than the person who bought $40 of fuel and drove away, sometimes several times more. Which is why the whole industry has been quietly rebuilding itself around the door rather than the pumps. Look at what is inside now. Cigarettes used to be the anchor. In 2013, they were around 37% of in-store sales. By 2024, they were 19.4% of in-store sales and only 7.1% of in-store gross profit. High revenue, thin margin, and shrinking every year. Now look at what replaced them. Food service, meaning prepared food, coffee, and dispensed drinks, was 11.9% of in-store sales in 2005. In 2025, it was 28.5% of in-store sales and 38.9% of in-store gross profit. The single most profitable thing in a modern gas station is food. And this brings us to the second thing I promised you, and to my favorite fact in this entire research. Casey's General Stores operates more than 2,600 locations, mostly in small towns across the Midwest. It sells fuel. It has pumps out front. It is also a top 5 pizza chain in the United States by store count. Casey's has been making pizza from scratch since 1984. Its prepared food gross margins have run around 59 to 61% against retail fuel margins in the single digits to low teens. And roughly 62 to 63% of its gross profit comes from inside the store. In a filing to investors, Casey's cited an industry statistic that is worth hearing carefully. Around 70% of surveyed operators are not profitable without fuel. That sentence sounds like it contradicts everything I have just told you. It does not. It means the fuel brings the cars. Without the cars, the store has no traffic and cannot cover its costs. But the fuel itself is not where the money is made. Fuel is the customer acquisition cost. The store is the business. That is the answer to the disappearance of 150,000 stations. The stations that vanished were the ones that were only selling gasoline. A pump island, a small booth, a person making change. That business model has almost no margin left after interchange, and it cannot compete on price with a warehouse club selling 1 million gallons a month at 20 cents under market from 747 locations. What survived was a restaurant with fuel pumps attached. Now there is another thing worth clearing up, because almost everyone has this wrong. The oil company name on the canopy usually does not mean the oil company owns the station. Industry estimates put major oil company ownership at fewer than 5% of American stations. When ExxonMobil announced its exit from retail in 2008, roughly 75% of its 12,000 stations were already owned by branded distributors who simply bought Exxon products and paid to use the name. BP and Shell had already divested. That brand is a supply and licensing contract. The person who owns the station is almost always a small business, and 60% of all convenience stores in America are single-store operators. And those owners carry a category of risk almost nobody outside the industry thinks about. Underneath that concrete are underground storage tanks. Installing 3 new 10,000-gallon tanks runs roughly $76,000 to $100,000. But the tanks are not the real exposure. The contamination is. The average cleanup of a leaking tank site runs somewhere between $125,000 and $154,000, and where groundwater is affected, from 100,000 up to 1 million. There have been more than 532,000 confirmed releases from underground tanks in this country. Ordinary commercial liability insurance generally does not cover tank pollution. Federal rules require a separate financial responsibility mechanism, and state trust fund coverage varies enormously, with some funds closed to new claims. So this is a business with fuel margins measured in cents, a payment cost measured in billions, and an environmental liability that can exceed the value of the entire property. Which raises the obvious final question: what about electric vehicles? And here I want to give you both sides, because the forecasting record on this subject is genuinely poor. The bullish case is real. Bloomberg's 2026 outlook expects roughly 27% of cars sold globally this year to be electric, up from 9% 5 years ago and around 52% by 2035. The American picture is very different. After the federal tax credit ended in September 2025, Bloomberg projects United States electric vehicle sales fell about 19% in 2026. Their forecast has only 24% of the American fleet electric by 2040, against 60% or more in China. And a caution that applies to everyone quoting these numbers, including me. Bloomberg's own retrospective on this subject notes that forecasts from 2020 and 2021 massively overshot, with some analysts predicting the end of the internal combustion engine by 2027. Actual sales came in far below. Anyone giving you a confident date is guessing. But here is the part that genuinely surprised me. And it is the counterintuitive kicker for anyone who owns one of these buildings. A gasoline fill-up takes 3 to 4 minutes. An electric charging session typically runs around 30. Remember what this business actually is. It is a store that uses a fuel island to park customers next to a door. The single biggest constraint on the store side has always been that the customer is only there for 4 minutes. Charging gives you 30. Operators have started describing this openly, not as selling electrons, but as monetizing dwell time. The margin on the electricity itself is difficult, with high demand charges and low utilization. But a customer standing on your property for half an hour is an entirely different retail opportunity than one who is gone before the pump clicks off. I am not telling you this makes the transition painless. Fuel volume decline is real for a business built on fuel volume. But if the profit was never really in the fuel, then the threat is smaller than it looks, and the opportunity is stranger than expected. So let's put a year on it, both ways. In the good scenario, you own a high-traffic site with a serious food program. Your inside gross profit alone covers the site's operating costs, which is exactly what the trade association tells operators to aim for. Fuel margin becomes upside rather than survival. Your pump-to-store conversion runs above the 64% national average because you gave people a reason to come in. Your tanks are modern and documented. That is a genuinely good business, and it is why the sector is consolidating, with acquisitions priced around 11 times earnings. In the realistic scenario, you bought a fuel-led site with a small store. Nothing dramatic happens. Your volumes are fine, roughly 1,400 transactions a day, but 82% of them are on a card, so a percentage of every sale leaves before you touch it. Your inside basket is small because there is no reason to come in beyond a drink and a lottery ticket. Cigarettes are still 19% of your inside sales, and they are declining every year. Then crude spikes. Your street price cannot rise as fast as your cost. Your margin compresses to a few cents, and Interchange takes it. For several weeks, you are effectively pumping fuel for free. Meanwhile, the club store 4 miles away is 20 cents under you and does not need to make money on gasoline at all. Nothing burned down. Your pumps work. Your lot is busy. You just discovered that you bought the parking lot and forgot to build the business it was supposed to serve. That is the whole thing in one line. In almost every retail business, the product in the window is the product. Here, the product in the window is a loss leader with a percentage fee attached, and the actual business is a small restaurant 30 feet behind it. Which means the honest question was never whether people will keep buying gasoline. $476 billion a year says they will, for a long time. The question is, what happens in the 4 minutes after they park, and whether you built anything worth walking toward. This video is general education about how an industry works, not business, financial, or investment advice. If you want the underlying numbers, the Energy Information Administration publishes gasoline price composition and tax data. The Convenience Store Trade Association publishes its annual State of the Industry figures, including card fee totals, and the major operators disclose fuel margins and inside sales in their public filings.